Good morning, everybody. My name is Lisa Coolman-Bola. I come from the West office. Welcome to the Endnote for our 2022 Patent Literacy Symposium. It has been a long journey to get here. We are so honored at the exemplary guests and speakers and teachers and implementers and researchers that have been able to join us across the last 3 days. And we are especially excited for this Endnote with Dr. Archer. Dr. Archer has traditionally closed our literacy symposium, and so we're just excited to see her and have her with us to do that again today. Just before we get started, I want to make sure that I thank our literacy team. Without this team of small but mighty Pennsylvania team across the state, we would not be able to accomplish what we are accomplished. Their hard work, dedication to the field. We had great researchers and panelists coming up and giving us lots of great feedback. So we are very appreciative of all of your work as well and your support in the symposium. If you need to access the presenter handouts, the presenter bio, and even this schedule, if you want to go back for reference, all of the sessions are recorded, or most of them are. So you can go back and take a look at those at the link that you found in the chat. As a reminder, this session is recorded. It's about 75 minutes in length. Dr. Archer has asked that you use the Q&A for questions. So we've kept the chat closed, and so you will be using the Q&A. You will also stay muted because we are in that webinar mode. To access the closed captioning, all you have to do is click the CC live transcript on the Zoom control panel. And if you experience any technology difficulties, please go to our technical support guide area above the symposium page. We would love for you to tweet out or share on social media, and our hashtag is PaTTANLit2022. So without further ado, it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce the author, researcher, consultant, and teacher extraordinaire, Dr. Anita Archer.
Lisa, thank you so much. I have a lot to live up for in this Endnote. I am deeply honored to be back in Pennsylvania at this wonderful symposium. I was there 2 years ago, and I put on my calendar to be here 2 years from now. In 2024, these symposiums are held every 2 years. So, I did last evening what I would do for when I go to any state, because I'm fascinated by the different perspectives our states have in our union. And so I looked up, well, what do I need to know about Pennsylvania? Though I've been there many times, been to all of your major cities, been to some of your small villages, been to your beautiful mountains. I'm right now today in Portland, Oregon. And so I went online and looked up. I'm going to give you a little quiz. Some of you are not from Pennsylvania. Some of you I've met are from Montana and Wyoming and Oregon and etc. So you may not know these answers, but I give a little quiz to the Pennsylvania people. So think, what is your animal, your state animal? Okay, it is the white-tailed deer. White-tailed deer. And just the day before yesterday, I live right down in the middle of the city in Portland. We had the first deer we've seen in 25 years wander up our street. And it was a white-tailed deer, but not from Pennsylvania. Okay, fish. What do you think the state fish is? It is a brook trout. A bird. Now, many states have birds like robins, hummingbirds, goldfinch. You have the only game bird I've ever seen on a list. You have the grouse. Now, I was reading down it, and that was, the animal and the fish was kind of like normal. And then I came, and you actually have a state dog, a dog. Think about what it might be. It is a Great Dane. And then why do I have this flower here? Because I have never had the great opportunity. I love flowers and take pictures all the time of flowers, but you have the mountain laurel. Isn't that beautiful? I can't wait to come to Pennsylvania and see it in person. But then I scrolled down even further and it had state mottos. And it was sort of like a gift to us of what your state motto is. Oh, yes, you're the Keystone State. But your motto is virtue, liberty, independence. Virtue. So I pulled up on Google the word virtue and asked for examples. And it was like reading a list of educator virtues, reading a list of what you do every day in the classroom, every day if you're an administrator. So just think about you. You're patient, you're reliable, you're respectful, responsible, kind, friendly, generous, compassionate, hardworking. Is that not a teacher? Is that not an educator? And so, okay, so virtue. And then I said, this whole conference is absolutely directed at the last two parts of that motto, giving students independence and liberty. So how does your state define this? The ability to pursue your own interests and preferences for full autonomy over one's life. Full autonomy over one's life. Think about this for a moment. How would you have full autonomy over your life if you were unable to read with ease? If you were unable to understand the vocabulary embedded in what you're reading, if you were unable to write in a literate fashion in response to an event. So I said to myself, I'm going to reflect back on the last 2 hours of my life. This was last evening, and write down the events. I want you to do this in your own life. The events that required very good reading and writing skills. So I looked back at the last 2 hours, and the first thing I wrote down is, I'm planning to go on a trip tomorrow. And so I needed to go online to verify when my plane was leaving. I had to read in order to do that. And unfortunately, it's leaving way too early. It's a 7:30 flight. Oh, no. And then I had a small dinner. And I said, well, during dinner, I'm going to read the book on spelling that was written by one of the speakers, Lynn Stone. So I was reading a fascinating book about having a system for teaching spelling. And so then I went back up to my office and I read and responded to some emails. And then I worked for about an hour on some articles I'm writing in a revision for Phonics for Reading. And then I said, oh, my assistant has been out ill and I better check on my hotel arrangements in Bellingham, Washington, where I'm headed, and get some outdoor restaurant menus so we can go to dinner. And then I said, oh, Pamela just sent me some questions to respond to for one of my sessions. I better work on that. And then the last thing I did in that period of time is in the summer, I like all my nieces and nephews, my great nieces and nephews, to be very literate. So I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old nieces, great nieces. And so in the summer, I send them books to read. So I put in an order to have delivered today 2 books, for one for each of them, and they'll switch books too. Now look at that. For me to have full autonomy of my life, I had to read, I had to write, and I had to do both of them very, very well. This gives me freedom to choose what I want to do. So just take a moment and realize that this mission that we have, that is elevated in this literacy symposium, totally dictates what you can do for the rest of your life for your own choices. So you live in a state of virtue, liberty, and independence. And we are, with our virtues, trying to give students the opportunity for liberty and for independence. Well, that was what I learned. Later, I'll test you. Will you remember the dog of Pennsylvania? I think I'll never forget that it is the Great Dane. Well, my job in this Endnote was to reflect back on this conference, to reflect back on the sessions. So I read all the materials that are posted. You should do the same, so that I could get an idea of what your takeaways were. And when I submitted long ago the description of this session, I had sitting on my desk this statement that you're very aware of. Do the best you can until you know better. When you know better, do better. And this is exactly what the purpose of this conference was. By having 75 sessions of some of the best experts in terms of their area of literacy, so that we would know what is better so that we could do better. And so I took a moment to reflect and take a few notes on my yellow tablet of times in the last few years where I've worked with districts across our nation, where districts said, this practice we are using is not the optimum practice for gains in literacy. And we need to make a new decision and abandon that and replace it with the science of reading. And that is exactly what has happened in your district, in your state. So I just wrote down some examples. So I was working in a district where in all the rooms was a poster for decoding in K1 and 2. And it started with eagle eye. Look at the picture if you can't figure out the word. And lips the fish. Get your mouth ready. And you know what they did? They did what many of you have done. They said, no, that's guessing. The only hint in reading words is the letters on the paper, the print, and you say the sounds in order and blend it together. And so they had to say, we know better and we're going to do better. Down come the posters and up came. And they did exactly what was done in your state. And that is many of your schools in the primary grades have adopted ECRI, a synthetic phonics program with excellent teaching procedures. And already when you know better and you do better, you saw better results in terms of the acquisition of your kindergarten, first and second grade children. ECRI, for those of you who don't know what it means, it is enhanced core reading instruction. So when we know better, we do better. So I was thinking about some other examples. So I was working in a district that had a decoding program, and then they had a separate spelling program, and there was no match between them. And yet what we know is that if I teach you spelling and it utilizes the phoneme-grapheme associations or the morphemes that you've been taught, that's going to strengthen your reading. And if I teach you sounding out words in a synthetic decoding program, that is going to strengthen your spellings. So let us match those two together. I was working in a district where they were very intent on teaching kids how to respond to different kinds of questions. And the students' comprehension, measured comprehension, was still low. And we looked at it and said, well, it's low because of two things. One was the students didn't have vocabulary necessary for the passages. And they didn't have the background knowledge that would allow them to connect what they were reading to what was already in permanent memory. So what did they do? They upped the amount of vocabulary instruction, K6. They upped the amount of knowledge taught in science, in social studies, and before passages were going to be read. Did they see a difference? Absolutely. So when you know better, you do better. And my last example, you know, I've taught for 55 years and for most of that time I've written curriculum. But when I know better, I have to do better. So let me just share two that I had to do as I am revising phonics for reading. So in 1984, Phonics for Reading was first published. And we had lots of research there. It's just amazing what we knew that now is sort of getting into practice. Wow, we should be able to get things into practice before 50 years pass. But anyway, and we already knew about teaching letter sound associations directly with synthetic phonics. We already knew about teaching morphographs, the prefixes and suffixes as patterns in longer words. So, but at that time, and often continued, that we would teach decodable words one way and irregular words another way. And that meant that we would just teach them as whole words. And we might add spelling so that they would attend to the letters, which does have some validity. But in most irregular words, like let's say it's the word said, there's only one part of it that is not pronounced like you'd expect. The other letter sound associations are the same. So now we might sound it out. Aid. He said it. Is that a real word? No. And so the tricky part is AI. The word is said. What is it? Said. In other words, those letter sound associations are even helpful in irregular words. You just have to constantly think, I've got to make it a real word, make it a real word. So we had to rewrite that strand in our program, because when you know better, you got to do better. So my hope is that in this symposium, when you went to these sessions with the chosen experts, that you plucked out of it something that you could say, we have to do better at our school site. So those were my reflections last night. It was a good evening. I reflected on Pennsylvania, and I reflected on when you know better, do better. So I just gave you a whole bunch of examples, and I put a bunch of, because I'd never seen these flowers. I love them. Your mountain laurel. So this conference, actually, because I've had the gift of being here before, I know what their goals were. And I hope you felt their goals throughout. One was to affirm what you're already doing. Because I know that when you went to some sessions that you said, ooh, we do that now. Oh, we changed that, now we do that. Ooh, yes, we do that. Sometimes the purpose was to remind you. Even when I read the chat box from my own 3 sessions, many people said, oh, I'm reminded that was important. I need to do it. And then it was to expand your knowledge. I met one person who said, I went to all the spelling sessions because I felt that our spelling was not optimum. And so it was beyond reminding to expand it. But in the end, it'll only be a useful symposium if we apply it. If we say, oh, I learned a new practice that I need to add to my repertoire, because my goal is to make students be independent with liberty. And we're doing that by ensuring that they can read and write at the highest level. Well, I did look at the sessions, and there were 75 sessions. Whoa, do you realize there is more knowledge in that 75 sessions than if you were pursuing a master's degree, even the pre-doc dissertation in a doctorate program embedded in those sessions? Oh my goodness. I mean, you got a gift, and they're making it so useful for you to access. I love the fact that I went to a few sessions, but not all of them, but I can go to all of them. Isn't that cool? And they had excellent presenters who were experts, masters of their area of literacy. So you think, oh, who should you talk to about fluency? Well, Jan Hasbrick's coming. And so who should you talk about phonemic awareness? Well, Louisa Moats will be there. So this was a total gift of very careful planning of a conference. And when I went through the handouts and the sessions I went to, they were all research informed. And again and again and again, they said, this is what our research gives us. Now, do we have answers on every single question for research? No. But what we can do is take our most informed practices and utilize them to help us make decisions. And so because people ask me questions, what's the research study to show that you should do this? Well, maybe we don't have a study on that, but we do have something that's highly related that would inform us, that would keep us on the right path of doing the right thing for our children. And they recorded the sessions. They're not up yet. Got to give technology some time to get them all organized, but they're going to be on their YouTube channel. And the handouts were posted and often additional materials. So the richness of this conference symposium is so evident. And you must agree, because you went to sessions and you, like myself, heard these experts, saw the sessions. Now you get to tap into it. So one of the things I did, I said, now when you go to a conference like this, Archer, what are you going to do to like optimize it? Because it's much bigger than just the few sessions I was able to attend. So I said to myself, which I'd recommend to you too, well, I attended some sessions, a few sessions each day. I had to give some sessions, so I listened to myself, and they were okay too. But I had to really reflect on the content to decide what is the content that I wanted to do as a takeaway. And that's why I started reading again the book on spelling called Spelling for Life by Lynn Stone, because I needed to expand on that information in that session. So I asked myself, what practices do you want to add to your high leverage practices? We all have a toolbox of practices that we use. What do we want to add to it? And then what else do I want to learn about it? Boy, almost every session had further readings that you could do to follow up. Okay, so if I really want to make this worthwhile, which when we took college classes, we didn't always do this kind of thinking. We just wanted to get through it, get the grade, get the credit. It's too bad that we didn't take more time to think, okay, what practices do I want to take with me? What else do I need to learn about this? But I'd also suggest that you do what I did last night. I took the whole segment, 75 sessions, and went through and said, I didn't go to this one, but I need to know this. I didn't go to this one, but I need to know this. And I met so many of you who were administrators and coaches at your school site. You also are going to have a great gift for professional development, so that you could look for sessions and say, we need to use that in our PLCs. They're going to be available to you. Woo. And I don't think you'd ever, you're not going to be able to have Louisa Moats personally come to your school. I can pretty well guarantee you. But you got to listen to her, the premier person on phonemic awareness. And I want you just with me to celebrate the quality of this conference. One of the best literacy conferences in the United States, and you had it in Pennsylvania, home of the Great Dane. I won't forget that one. So as I looked at those sessions, I want you just to have a little checklist, because I wrote down the topics that were covered. It was just a fun thing when I spent a few evenings reading the handouts. And so check ones that you say, ooh, yes, I went to that session. Oh, yes, I learned about that. Oh, I need to learn more about that. Oh, there's a session on that. I'm going to follow up on that. Because it was basically the topics listed what we might look at under the science of reading. Okay, get ready for this. And you don't probably have a copy of it, but it's now posted, so you can get a copy later, but just sort of check them off. So as I went through the sessions, first similarities, what was the focus of every session? To me, this was so evident that the whole goal of one session after the next session, if the next session was a focus on student learning. That's what we're about as teachers. That is what we are about. But sometimes we get our attention pulled away to other areas, but it is learning that is the outcome of schooling. So session after session, learning, 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 learning. And the relationship, which is very important, that it is the teaching that we provide that leads to the learning. So when students aren't doing well in reading, we look at our teaching. How can we strengthen that? When the students have certain difficulties, we say, we need to intensify their instruction within tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3. And so we're never forgetting that there is a relationship between what we do on a daily basis as teachers in terms of student learning. And we are dedicated to that understanding. If they're not doing well, let's look at our practices. Let's look at our practices. That's the only thing we can control and alter. So the teaching and learning, teaching and learning, teaching and learning, teaching and learning. All right. So here were the topics covered in terms of being able to read the words on the paper. And I always say that we have to remember that there is no comprehension strategy that will compensate for the fact that if you have poor comprehension, unless you can read the words, there's just no comprehension strategy that's going to compensate for the fact you can't read the words. So that has to be part of our mission. And it is in Michigan, in your state of Pennsylvania. I almost said Michigan, but it's their mission too, because you have sort of parallel paths going on in those two locations. And so that oral language is the absolute foundation of all areas of literacy, because my oral speech, my oral language, which I naturally get through billions of years of basically evolution, that ability. But it is that language that's necessary for decoding and is necessary for comprehension. And there were sessions on foundation skills, like how to teach students the alphabet, how to teach them the letter names, how to teach them handwriting and relationship to it. And then the very first speech that you had by Louisa Moats was on phonological awareness, the understanding that spoken language can be broken down into different units, can be broken down into syllables, can be broken down into onset rhymes, can be broken down into phonemic awareness, and some very good sessions on phonemic awareness and the sequence that needs to occur in phonemic awareness and the practice that students need and the rationale of why they need to be able to hear sounds within words and manipulate it, both for the act of decoding and encoding. And there were many sessions that focused on decoding. Looking at the print, not guessing. No, not guessing based on the picture or the context or getting your lips ready, but looking at the graphemes, saying the phonemes that related to it and sounding it out, going from the print to the speech. There was also an emphasis on pairing that with encoding, spelling, where we go from speech to print. And both of those need to be incorporated in our decoding programs to teach phonics, that we look at the letters, say the sounds, blend it together, say the word. We say the word and we listen to the sounds and write the corresponding letters. So the need for these reciprocal abilities of decoding and encoding. And that you should teach letter sound associations in a synthetic phonics program, not an analytic one. Synthetic meaning that I show you the letter, I say the sound, you repeat the sound, we practice it so that you have instant automatic recognition of the letter sound association. That students had to, a number of sessions looked at teaching students how to respond to polysyllabic words, multisyllabic words, utilizing the embedded syllables. Every syllable has one vowel sound. Every syllable has one vowel sound, and utilizing prefixes and suffixes, patterns within words. And in terms of word reading, there were also sessions on ways to look at irregular words and the fact that many of the letters in irregular words, though some of them are tricky, there's many of them that have the expected phoneme, grapheme association. And finally, there were sessions on fluency, looking at rate in terms of normal speech, but also accuracy. Accuracy comes before rate. If you're not accurate, we don't want to work on pace, but then also prosody and expression. So you're going to look back and say, oh, I want to learn more about some of these topics, but I bet many of them you went to. So you said, oh, I learned something new about that. I learned something new about that. Oh, I was reminded of that. I already do that. Well, some of the sessions focused on comprehension. And so as I read those handouts, these were the topics that booped out to me. That again, comprehension is very related to the foundation of oral language, the ability to speak and listen and comprehend. And you need to be able to read the words accurately and automatically. And a number of sessions focused on the importance of word knowledge of vocabulary. And, you know, words, they're all we have for expressing ideas. And so we must continue explicitly, intently teaching vocabulary. But have you noticed in the last 2 years, a great deal of additional focus on background knowledge? Thinking that we have moved away to teach kids a lot of how to answer certain kinds of questions in comprehension, but not recognizing as much the fact that these 3 are necessary for comprehension. You have to read the words accurately, you have to understand the meaning of words, and you have to have adequate amount of background knowledge for comprehension. Comprehension is an outcome, not just a strategy, but an outcome. And we had a number of sessions on one challenge for students, which is making inferences, where you utilize what the author said, plus what you knew from your own personal knowledge. Well, I was glad to see sessions on writing. You know, we have not given enough time and energy to writing. And as a result, almost every district represented at this webinar, your lowest area of performance at your school sites is writing, partly because they don't write. It's just like in reading, if you don't read and the teacher reads everything to you, you don't get better. And writing, you've got to write and write and write some more and write and write some more to get better. And so that means you have to have some foundation skills, which are addressed in a number of the sessions. You have to be able to have handwriting, that's automatic, spelling, and there were some great sessions on spelling, utilizing letter sound associations, and then going beyond the phonological aspects to the morphographic aspects of spelling, and also to spelling patterns. And you need to be able to write sentences. There was a number of sessions that talked about how to strengthen students' sentence writing, and then writing texts that are articulated in your own standards. I talked about having kids write often with short projects. We had in other sessions that they would write a summary, that they would be able to write a narrative, informative, and opinion. So you say, well, that's not my best area as a fifth grade teacher. Well, then spend some time. I'm going to dedicate, now some of you will too, for once or twice a week, I'm going to go to the YouTube for PaTTAN, and I'm going to watch more sessions. And I'm particularly interested in the ones on writing, because we have not given it enough credence in our teaching. That means time, effort, and energy. And so one session outlined the writing process of your plan. You write a draft, you revise, you edit. With the two that are most critical, planning, 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 revising, revising, revising. So that is the big picture of what you're doing here. But my area of expertise is instruction. So I also wrote down what were the words that were used in the sessions to talk about the instruction that should be given in all of those word level or comprehension or writing topics. You will not be surprised by this. First of all, I didn't find one session that said, well, the students will naturally discover this. No, they're not going to naturally discover how to revise something. They're not going to naturally discover what the sound of AI is. They're not going to naturally discover, particularly students who are at risk. So I didn't find anyone saying, bless them and have them discover. No, no, no. Every single expert said, teach it, teach it, teach it. And these were the words that they coupled with it. That the instruction needs to be structured. The teacher has to have a plan. I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And for the same content area, the next day might be, though the content would change, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And the next day, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. Structured so that the teacher knows the structure, structured that the students know the structure. And almost all of them said it's systematic. Well, that is referring to the fact that it needs a sequence, a progression in decoding, a progression in spelling, a progression in writing, from easy to difficult, to high frequency to low frequency, a plan, a systematic plan. In some cases, schools I worked with looked at decoding as, well, we'll just pluck out a few words from the passage we're going to read and look at the letters and talk about their sounds. Wow. They did not make the kind of gains that Pennsylvania's made with their program like ECRI, where they had a sequence of letter sound associations. They taught it very structured every day, and they made the instruction very direct. No matter where we look, if we look at different content areas, it appears that instruction that is direct, unambiguous, you'll get it. There's no way you're going to miss it. Very explicit instruction. And the infusion of routines. Now, routines are useful behaviorally. This is our routine for getting a drink of water. This is our routine for entering the classroom. This is a routine for exiting. Yeah. but routines are also very useful to teach almost every area of academics. So I, as the teacher, know when I introduce a vocabulary term, just use a routine that I had in one of my sessions. I'm going to introduce the pronunciation of the word. I'm going to introduce, then using a student-friendly definition, the meaning of the word. I'm going to illustrate that word with some examples, maybe pair in some non-examples, and I'm going to ask questions to check your understanding. And the next day, I'm going to introduce the pronunciation, the meaning, examples, check for understanding. And the next day, but that's empowering to me as a teacher. I don't have to think, well, how am I going to teach this today? Because I have a routine. So you look at these handouts, you're going to see embedded in them routines, routines, routines. So making a difference. Now, yesterday, I got 2 emails and say, Archer, are you going to remind us or teach us any new Archerisms? Well, throughout my whole career, one of my goals was to make things memorable so that we would know big ideas in a memorable way. And my college students began to say, well, that's an Archerism, that's an Archerism. And then I had an event that really reminded me of the power of it. And because I got an award from the state of Oregon, where I live in Oregon, for education. And I had students from my 3 universities where I taught send in Archerisms, and they organized a presentation on Archerisms. And I had students who I had in 1979 who remembered Archerisms from that time. So one day I was sitting at my desk, and this is pretty recently, and I said, well, here is what we need to do as teachers and educators. That we often take something and make it much more complex and difficult to put into place. And actually, we should be trying to do the reverse by taking it and making it obtainable, simplifying it, but not reducing the quality of it. And that we need to simplify, but then we need to clearly clarify exactly what's involved in doing it. So whether we take decoding and simplify, then we clarify exactly how that will be done. And then we do exactly what Pennsylvania's done in many of these settings with early reading and the use of ECRI. They intensify it. So it really makes a difference, constantly checking students' understanding, using formative assessment. So now this is a new Archerism. Simplify, clarify, intensify. Simplify, clarify, intensify. And that is exactly what we need to do to make a difference as teachers, make a difference as a school site, so we can convey it to others and we can carry it out. All right, so in honor of the 2 people who emailed me, there's never a time that I would be speaking anywhere that I would not say, let's go back and remind us whether I am teaching decoding skills, whether I am teaching comprehension, whether I am teaching a writing skill, what should my instruction look like? Because I can tell you, you could adopt a program, but without putting a layer on it of what do we know about instruction that empowers children and increases their learning, it might not make a big difference. And so explicit instructions, what we're going to review. And some of you'll say, okay, yep, Archer, I know that. I've got to do that. I've got to watch that. So you're going to, got a piece of paper? Okay, we're going to look at the big ideas in instruction that make a difference. And we are going to just write down a word or two to remind us of what that attribute of instruction is. And then you're going to just do a little bit as we go of self-analysis. A star goes after it if I am good, always, always, always with that. A check if you say, I'm pretty good, but I could check in and improve that. And a minus saying, oh, that is too often absent from my instruction. But we're going to first summarize, simplify it, write it down, and then we'll do a little self-analysis. And so what do we know if I was to look at your instruction and look at it through the lens of, is it going to make a difference with our students? And so the first thing is that teachers who are experts, who are more likely to make a difference, are constantly focusing in on critical content. They're asking themselves, is this useful in the moment? Is this useful in the future? Will it be empowering? The sessions that you had here had nothing but critical content, but occasionally you'll see in a material, ooh, well, that is not critical. I need to take that time and put it on what's going to make the most difference so that our instruction is effective and efficient, is focused on the critical content. So I wrote down number 1 and critical content. Well, what is the archerism that goes with it? Well, some of you, in fact, some people said, oh, I'll never forget that one. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff, everybody. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff. This becomes particularly important for those of you, and many of you who are in this role, who came to this conference, who are interventionists or special ed teachers. And so you have students that come in at this level and you want them to be at this level. Wow, how are you going to do that? The only way you're going to be able to do that is cutting out anything that isn't essential and then teaching it in the most systematic, structured, direct, explicit manner to lift them up to this point. So this is something, and all of us can take, particularly tier 1 core materials, and sometimes say, really important, give it more time. Less important, give it less time. Fluffy content we don't need, and cut that out. Teach the stuff and cut the fluff. Now, did you put a star, a check, or a minus? Right after it, number 2. And read it with me, follow that cursor. Clearly communicate the lesson's goal to promote learning. It appears, and not surprising, that the students, when they know what was the intent, that they are going to do better in terms of focusing in on the critical content. Now, there's many ways. We've called this the behavioral objective. We have called it the learning intention. We've had many names for it. But basically, if I was to visit your classroom and took 2 students aside and say, so, don't tell me what you're doing, but what are you supposed to learn? What is the knowledge? What is the skill, strategy, or vocabulary you're to learn? Then if they could say that, well, I am to learn how to write a topic sentence. We are learning the sound of OA and using that in words as we decode. Then I know that the students are having much higher probability of learning it. But then also, you as the teacher need to know the outcome, because you cannot come out without an outcome. It's so clever. Well, maybe not. You cannot come out without an outcome. You need to know where you are going so that you have planned it. You know exactly how you plan to get there, and the students are going to follow that path. Well, what else do we need? And read it with me. Provide quality, engaging instructional lessons that yield learning. First of all, this would indicate that you better plan, better know what outcome you're going to, what critical content you're going to teach. This is what our students deserve, is every day in every class, quality, engaging instruction. And so I'm just going to put down quality instruction. Now, here's the interesting thing. We all, whether we're administrators or leaders of PaTTAN, we've all taught. And we can remember that we have had two very divergent experiences. One experience is a day, or maybe we went to a party the previous evening and didn't get to plan as much as we would want, and the lesson was not of quality, and it wasn't fairly engaging, and we could hardly think about what we're going to do next. And we just hoped the principal wouldn't walk in, do a walkthrough, and definitely not the superintendent. Every one of you has had that kind of lesson that did not yield learning. But every one of you have also had the other situation where it was well planned. You knew the routines. You knew exactly what you were going to do. The students were engaged. There was learning. And so we just need to realize that all of us have had both experiences. And of course, we want to get more of the engaging. So what are some archerisms that go with this? You know, from the very beginning of my work in teacher training, the relationship between teaching and learning was so apparent. For I realized how well I teach equals how well they learn. And that was the motto of all of the programs that I had at universities. How well I teach equals how well they learn. And then some basic rules about engaging lessons. Often they contained demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. I do it, we do it, you do it. I say the sound, we say the sound, you say the sound. Watch me write a topic sentence. Let's write some together. 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 Now you do it. And this is the question I've been asked so much in the last 2 years. People saying our children just aren't motivated. They just aren't motivated. They just don't have the motivation that other children have, as if you were born with motivation or not, that it was an inbred attribute. But that's not what research says. What research says is your motivation, you're willing to put in energy and effort is enhanced, one, by your success. If you believe you can be successful, if you can figure out these unknown words, if you could read these multi-syllable words, if you could write a coherent paragraph, success. And it was conveyed to you of value so that you could see it would be valuable to be the words, valuable to write a sentence that made sense. Then you're much more motivated to do it. So when I want to increase a group's motivation, I'm going to be certain that I act as if this is really important, really important, really important, and I'm going to teach it in such a way that they'll be successful. So I wrote down quality instruction. I'm going to put a star after it because I've worked on this my whole career. The goal, I had to put a little check because do I always tell kids the goal? I'm not always as clear as I could be. And you know how passionate I am about this one, so read it with me. Actively involve all students in responding throughout the lesson, making learning possible. All students respond. All students respond throughout the lesson. Now, if there was one instructional practice that we have very clear research on, it is the importance of active participation. It is the importance of giving students opportunities to say things and write things and do things throughout the lessons. And I'm not just talking kindergarten and first grade, I am talking high school English classes. I am talking middle school science classes, that we know that the opportunities are very high in the most effective classrooms. And so we need to ensure that this foundation of instruction is in place at our school. So for number 4, I'm going to write down active participation. Now, over time, I have had a lot of archerisms to remind us about this importance. First, if you look at reviews of research meta-analysis, and they looked at expert teachers, and they found that when the responses were fairly simple, that the most effective teachers didn't have just one response per period or one response every 15 minutes, but multiple responses per minute, 3 to 5. When the responses were more complex, they still had on an average, one response per minute. This is interactive. I say something, you say something, I write something, you write something. And so let's just look at the archerisms. So learning is not a spectator sport. It's sort of like if you want to get better at cooking, you might watch cooking shows, but I highly recommend you cook. If I wanted to get to be a better runner, right now I'm just working on walking, trying to walk 3.5 miles a day, which is, whoa, for me in this little body that sat in a chair all through the pandemic, a little struggle. I can't just watch as I did 2 nights ago. I watched the tryouts, not the tryouts, the finals for the Pac-12 track, because, you know, Oregon is a track state. Well, I can't just watch that running to get better. I got to get out and move my body. Same thing in the classroom. If I'm not retrieving it or rehearsing the information, I will not retain it. I need to say it. I need to write it. I need to do it. So in the schools I'm working with now, this is one of our mottos for active participation. Every day in every class, every student is participating by speaking, writing, doing. Every day in every class, every student is participating by speaking, writing, or doing. Now, the next motto I actually borrowed from a good friend of mine, Kevin Feldman, an excellent speaker at particularly the secondary level on opportunities to respond. Everyone does everything. Everybody is saying an answer together. Everybody's saying an answer to their partner. Everybody is writing it down. Everybody is solving that math problem and holding it up. Everybody is doing everything. And that means that in all the schools I'm working with, one thing we had to do is get rid of raised hands. Because if my habit as a teacher is I ask a question, students volunteer, I call on them. As you well know, I end up calling on the highest performing students, the most proficient in English, the most assertive students. So I might call on students occasionally when I don't expect all of them to have an answer because it's just their personal experience, or I will use it to check in with students after everybody said it together, everybody wrote it down, everybody said it to their partner, and then I might call on a few, but we're going to get rid of the raised hands. I know that it seems like un-American, un-Pennsylvania to say, do not raise your hands, unless you have a question for me. But if I have a question for you, don't raise your hands. A great way to start the school year, no hand raised. Well, that's my specialty. So I'm giving myself a star for active participation. And next, number 5. And my turn to read it. Carefully monitor students' responses, adjusting the lesson as necessary to ensure learning. monitor, monitor, monitor some more. We have to be so present. This is all sort of like a Zen practice, a mindfulness practice. I've got to be so present in my classroom that all my thoughts are here. All my thoughts are with my students' responses. So I am looking carefully, listening carefully, so I can adjust my instruction. And I'm not looking at my watch. I'm not checking my steps. I'm not answering the phone. I am there. Whether it's a small group, an intervention, or a large group, I am present, looking carefully, listening carefully. And when the kids are working, I'm not sitting at my desk. I'm not standing and waiting. I am circulating. And I borrowed this one from Stan Payne, but it really talks about monitoring of independent work or partner work or teamwork. I walk around, I look around, I talk around. I walk around, I look around, I talk around. When I talk around, I give feedback. And that brings us to our next one. And so for number 5, I want you to, 5 was monitor, and number 6 is feedback. Wow, this one, again, very high effect size of making a difference. No matter whose meta-analysis we look at, it makes a difference in terms of learning. Immediate, appropriate feedback. That means I might give you specific praise to individuals or to the whole group. Excellent. Everyone added transition words to their paragraph today, what we've been working on. Yes. Or informative feedback, how to improve performance. It might differ. So maybe I've taught you how to write a paragraph, and I go to the first students, they're writing their paragraph, and I say, excellent. You have a clear topic sentence. All your other sentences go with it. Excellent job. Now, remember, one thing you're working on is legible handwriting. It is so difficult to read it. Remember, the big way to do that, write on the lines. Next child. So here's what I see as I read this. You have excellent details on this topic. But now you need to go back. Let's see if we can come up with a topic sentence that will announce what the whole paragraph is about and go with your details. So I give informative feedback. And I do corrections. Now, this is the kind of mindset we must have as teachers and as curriculum writers, and that is when we learn something new that makes a big difference, we must do it. So let me give you an example from what has occurred as I've been working with rewriting phonics for reading. So in phonics for reading, if students made an error, we would often repeat the item and guide them to the answer. And that was the consistent, basically a redo it correction. And then they would say the answer, we give them feedback. But then I looked at the research actually done with my favorite colleague of 35 years, Dr. Mary Gleason. And she did a study while she was a professor at University of Oregon, where thousands of corrections were looked at. In one case, they used that kind of correction where they guided the students to the correct answer. In the other set, they told them the correct answer and then repeated the item and guided them to it. Oh, much bigger gains when they told them the answer and then guided them. I got to change all the corrections in phonics for reading. So tell them the answer. They sounded out a word and they didn't say it correctly. You tell them what the word is, and then you say, let's sound that out together. What word? Wow. When you know better, you do better. So feedback, I'm still working on this. I'm going to put a check on it, say, Anita, keep reading the research on specific praise, informative feedback, and corrections. Because this is so clever, feedback feeds forward. Feedback feeds forward. It doesn't feed back. It empowers you and should empower you to go forward. The teacher has given you specific praise. You want to repeat that in the future. The teacher has told you how to make a specific improvement in your own performance. That improves it. It moves forward. You get a correction where the teacher told you the answer and then guided you to it so you could take that knowledge and use it in the future. Okay, feedback. And then practice. So often I have had teachers say, well, I'm going to teach that tomorrow. And I have to remind them that it's going to take a good deal of practice to get to the outcome of it being stored in permanent memory, being automatic, and being used by the students. So number 7 is practice. And the research looks at deliberate practice, that is goal-oriented. Write this paragraph. Be certain that you have a topic sentence that announces the topic and detailed sentences that add to it. Deliberate practice. Oh, retrieval practice, where I am going over sounds, and instead of reviewing it by telling you the sound, I simply say, look here, what sound? Yes, they have to retrieve it from memory. And space practice, where it's spaced over time, not done in one session, but also have cumulative practice that is spaced. Because, get ready for this archerism, I really worked on it because I wanted to get the big idea from the research. Perfected practice, meaning you're getting better and better over time, makes perfect and permanent. You know that old adage, practice makes perfect? Not true. It has to be perfected practice that makes it permanent, and it's over time. All right. I'm still collecting more information on practice research, particularly for a book that I'm revising. Well, and we have management. Now our time, you know, one of the problems with this, like every conference, is we never have enough time. But we do need to remember that good teaching, good instruction, critical content, being sure we have an outcome, having quality instruction, maybe with I do it, we do it, you do it, active participation, yes, 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 opportunities to respond, they say it, they write it, they do it, monitor, 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 give them feedback to feed forward, and practice, practice, practice. But simultaneously, oh my God, our job is hard. We have to have management. And so we have to have routines. Predictability predicts ability. We have to have clear expectations. What you expect equals what you get. We have to pre-correct the behaviors we want. If we expect it, pre-correct it. We have to provide specific praise. Catch them being good. We have to have a perky pace. Avoid the void, for they will fill it. And finally, so I'm going to write down for 8, management. And, you know, 55 years of teaching, I've gotten really good at management. But this is what I know all of you are very good at. And that is, we want a positive teacher-student relationships. The open-hearted teachers of Pennsylvania and across the United States who are with us. And so we need to connect with students. We need to greet them at the door. We need to smile at them. We need to go from desk to desk and monitor them. We need to listen to them read, listen to what they've written on their books. We need to connect, connect, connect. And then I'm working on some projects across the country on kindness. Many of you are involved in positive support systems in terms of behavior, and many of them are adding kindness. What are the acts of kindness? I have as posters, I come up my steps into my house from the garage up, be kind, be kind, be kind. And recently, I've looked at this from a new lens. And that is when I look at, for example, the young men who've been involved in shooting at schools. They simply did not feel they belonged. And so through kindness and connection, we give students a feeling that they belong in our school. They belong in our classroom. They belong in this reading group. They belong, they belong, they belong. All of us are searching for belonging. All of us want to be found. And that is the kind of environment that creates the kind of virtuous citizens of Pennsylvania. And my oldest adage, teach with passion and manage with compassion. So we do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, you do better. And that's why you chose to come to the symposium. You wanted to do better. Now, I learned something before we started that I wanted to have just a little advertisement for at the end because I was so excited about it. So I want to ask that Dr. Pam Hessler comes on for a moment and tells you about what they're planning to do in terms of the science of reading statewide. Oh, she didn't expect this, but forgive me. It's so exciting. I want you to, if you didn't go to the session on it today, that you have some idea that the next time we're going to have a learning experience is not in 2024, but a beautiful path on that. So Pamela, can you give us a little idea?
Sure. I was talking to Anita about the session I did with my colleagues, Andrew Brow and Jeannie Hertzer today. The session we did was on the science of reading credential that's being created in Pennsylvania. There will be modules related to the science of reading, explicit instruction, all the big five of reading, decodable text, sound spelling walls, and written expression. We are in the process of creating those first 3 modules around explicit instruction and structured literacy, thinking of the simple view, word recognition, and language comprehension. Introductory modules that are going out to an expert group this summer, and then will be released in the fall to every Pennsylvania educator and educators across the world who are interested. We will also be creating practice modules. Just as Anita said, we need to know better. That's the foundation. But if we know better and we don't do better, nothing changes for kids. So we must know better and do better. And so there will be a practice side for Pennsylvania educators where they can learn the instructional strategies and explicit instruction related to phonemic awareness and phonics and comprehension and vocabulary, all the areas of literacy and language. So we're excited to offer that to the field. It's a result of House Bill 2045 that was passed in legislation that is currently in the Senate. And we look forward to supporting our state and beyond. And thanks for letting me share that, Anita.
Oh, Pamela, I'm very excited. I might have to tune in to those modules. And I'm so glad when you said the big 5, but then you just said language too. And language is the big 6.
Yes.
We need to do more in that area. Wow. Pennsylvania, they just continue to do better, don't they? And again and again, but it's the intentionality. You have simplified, you have clarified, and you have intensified. A total blessing. Well, all of you who are with us, I think it is exactly 1 minute until we are to be done. But don't you hate to have this conference end? Don't you want to do more sessions? Well, when you get the recordings available to you, which, Pamela, will they be sending out a notification of how to access those?
We can do that. We do have all the emails of everyone, but of course it will be placed on the PaTTAN Literacy Resource Hub, on the PaTTAN banner when you go to the PaTTAN.net. Everyone who knows me knows it'll be pushed out on social media widely and far and repeatedly. So folks will definitely know when the recordings are available. Our 2020 symposium that Anita graced us that every day and also did our EndNote is already on the resource hub. And I'll ask Lisa maybe to put that back in the chat. That symposium alone has had 160,000 views, but we think this symposium will surpass that. But there are already amazing resources on the Literacy Resource Hub. Please check them out. They were created by the wonderful, outstanding, exemplary PaTTAN literacy team.
Okay, so before the session started today, we were having fun. And so, Pamela, test. Pennsylvania. There, you got the animal right. You said deer, and the fish, you said trout. Excellent. The bird is a
Grouse.
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 We're doing retrieval practice. The dog.
The Great Dane.
The Great Dane, and the flower.
Mountain laurel.
Mountain laurel. And the motto.
Virtue, independence, and I wrote down liberty.
And liberty. Virtue, liberty, and independence. And so as we end this conference, we think about everything that teachers do. And I was sent a wonderful little reminder of what we do. So I want to end with this. We really appreciate you attended this conference, your dedication to student learning. And this was what I received. I slept and dreamt that life is joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy. That's our careers. To be of service, and it will be joy. If we know better, we do better. May you have a glorious summer. May the climate be moderate. May the floods be absent. May COVID not come your way. May you rest, gain energy for another year, because we have to make a difference with every child, every year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Archer. We are so honored every symposium that you come back to us year after year. As Dr. Archer told you, I already gave her our dates for the 2024 symposium. We do hold our symposiums every 2 years. You can jot them down to June 11th to the 13th, 2024. In the meantime, you'll be able to access these amazing recordings from this symposium and the one in 2020 as well. And we would like to thank Dr. Archer again for an informative and inspiring EndNote. Thank you so much, Dr. Archer.
You are so welcome. Bless all of you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, Dr. Archer.